Hey Don, how's it going?
Hey, Brandon, I'm well. How are you?
Doing great. Where in the world are you right now? Calling in.
On this beautiful day, I am in the East Bay of the Bay Area in California.
Love it.
Yeah.
I am.
How about you?
I'm in beautiful Park City, Utah. It's wonderful
Oh,
summer weather. Yeah, it's really nice.
my homeland. I grew up there. So skiing, yeah, that's right.
Indeed. Well, awesome. I'm really excited to have Don with us. Thank you, everyone who's on the other side of this Zoom for joining us today. We're really excited for this conversation. And we're really focused on what is, I think, just a very big season that we're all entering, which is the renewal season. And orienting this conversation as an Ask Me Anything, AMA with Dawn, to get your questions around renewal answered. And so excited to dive into that. We're going to do that here shortly. Before we do, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction, and I can start with myself before Dawn, but I'm Brandon Weber. I'm CEO and co-founder of Nava Benefits. And for those of you who don't know us yet, we are the first benefits brokerage that's oriented entirely around the mission to bring high quality, affordable healthcare to all Americans. And we're doing that by bringing the tools, the playbook, the thought leadership from some of America's biggest, most sophisticated employers down market to small and medium-sized employers to make benefits easier and to make the employee experience better. And specifically, we're hoping to help HR people get more done with all the many hats that they're wearing and many plates that they're spinning. So that's a little bit about Nava. And I'm here with Dawn Sharifan. So excited to be with you, Dawn, again. Dawn's former SVP for People at Slack. She's also a Nava advisor, and she is an advisor to other HR and executive leaders as well. So Dawn, thank you so much for being with us. This is going to be a fun conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Maybe before we dive into the AMA, it would be cool if you could just share a little bit of context about yourself and what you love most about being a people leader.
Sure. So I've been doing people work for about 20 years, which is really odd because I still feel, 29. And so odd how that happens. I started my career in benefits, actually. Worked part-time in insurance brokerage in college. Put myself through college, went into reinsurance, and then thought I would get my PhD in industrial organizational psychology, and thought, well, before I spend 7 years and several $100,000, let me see if I like this work. And thought, well, it's kind of glorified HR work. So got a job in HR in a benefits department in a top 10 international law firm where I learned to argue with some of the smartest people who argued in front of the Supreme Court, and found a career and passion that I loved, and have worked for Fortune 100 companies, small companies, companies that canceled their IPO the night before they went. So not everything is a success. And most recently with Slack, or grew the people team through DPO and then through sales to Salesforce in the second largest SaaS acquisition in Silicon Valley history at the time. And I was tired. And so I thought I'd just take this summer off, but I've had a lot of joy coaching, consulting, and advising these past 12 months. So that's a little. I live in the East Bay with my husband and 3 cats. That's a little bit about me.
I love it. Maybe one more fun fact. What's something that you're most proud of in your career when it comes to being a people leader?
People ask me this question. There's a few things that I'm proud of. I'm really, really proud of the teams that I've hired, specifically the team at Slack. And now that most of that team's disbanded, where they've gone, and good work that they're doing in other places. But the thing I think I'm most proud of is probably from my earliest first benefits job is I helped a woman get a lung. We fought the insurance company. I know we fight, but gone through all the red tape and the bureaucracy and the approvals and the following up and all of that. And I got to be the one to tell her when she got her lung transplant. And she went on to have a baby and have a lovely life. And I think of her often, and I think people work is really hard and it can be really lonely. And sometimes you get moments in your career where you get to really help somebody with something that's really meaningful. So that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of in my career.
That is so cool. Yeah. And such just a poignant example of the impact that you can make in the role. Yeah.
I think so.
It largely correlates to why I got into benefits brokers, because every single day you're on the front lines trying to help people navigate healthcare and solve problems. I absolutely love it. Awesome. Let's dive in. Renewals. That is the topic at hand. We're entering the renewal season for many folks right now, especially the ones on 1/1 renewal cycles. We got a lot of complexity here too that we're entering. We work with hundreds of HR leaders and teams, and we hear lots of things. We've got a quickly rising cost environment, both interest rates and healthcare costs. We've got kind of an explosion of employee needs with a shift to hybrid, remote, and post-COVID. Got recruiting, got new and tighter financial expectations from the C-suite and leadership. So a lot of moving parts here, and I think just a couple of data points that we're seeing too that really kind of I think maybe put a fine point on this. Just came out actually about a month ago. Latest data just around renewal trends and experience rating are showing that medical insurance costs are looking to trend up by over 7% going into the 2024 season. Just to put that in perspective, that's a big broad average that includes the largest employers to small. Just 2 years ago, that was about 5.5%. So that trend line just continues to go up. And small and medium-sized employers are feeling the brunt of that. They're on the higher end of those trends as well. So we're getting into kind of a scarier renewal cost season. And then you hear also when you read the surveys that employers are planning to figure out how do we expand our benefits for our population, all while many companies are trying to cut costs. So there's just like all these dynamics at play that we feel kind of firsthand. So we really want to find all the different ways that we can help. And so what we did over the last couple of months was just gather questions from HR leaders around the country, around just approaching renewals, and wanted to tackle them in an Ask Me Anything kind of format, just a discussion with Dawn and I. And so a few themes that we're going to hit running an effective renewal process, just the project management of renewal. And believe me, and Dawn, I know you've got a bunch of war stories on this. The difference between a great renewal project management approach and a poor one is actually massive in terms of the impact on the organization. We'll talk about managing costs in the tighter budget year, and then just want to talk about some real life stories, Dawn, from you, kind of from the trenches, getting through this process. So you ready to rock?
I'm ready to rock. Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. Who doesn't want to talk about open enrollment? People think fall, they think Halloween, Thanksgiving, maybe a Christmas holiday. No, I'm talking open enrollment. I'm talking new insurance cards. These are the things I want in my stocking. So I am ready to do this, Brandon.
I love that. An HR leader that we serve, she's like, open enrollment is my Super Bowl. And I was just like, oh wow, that was just such a great, poignant kind of description. So
it can be, yeah.
So Dawn, let's start on this running effective renewal process. I think maybe kind of to unpack, we can kind of open the topic, like key deadlines, timelines for benefits renewal activities. Like how should folks be thinking about this as we're entering Q3?
So, I mean, obviously it depends on when your renewal date is, but let's assume a January 1 renewal date for most people. I usually, ideally you're looking at it all through the year. Each quarter you're kind of assessing usage, all that kind of stuff. But let's just say you're an HR department on 1, you're doing the best that you can. You're just, oh crap, it's August. And now it's time to think about open enrollment. So I'd say August is really the time to start thinking about it, talking with your broker. What are we going to put out to bid? What are our renewal rates? Do we want to add anything? Do we want to drop anything? If you're going to do an employee survey, now would be kind of, I think, the last minute-ish time to do a survey. Keep it tight. Keep the survey deadline tight, maybe no longer than a week. Don't ask any questions that you're not prepared to address. And what I mean by that is, with all the best intention in the world, maybe you ask a question of like, what if you had any medical and dental, let's just assume we're covering that. And then if you could have any other kind of, benefit, what would it be? If you're not prepared to offer that, don't ask the question. Maybe think about how you're asking your questions between things you're considering. It's pet insurance, it's an EAP, it's a coaching platform, whatever that may be. Thinking about that, really structuring your questions so employees don't think like, well, I told you I wanted the ability to work from Rome for 9 months a year and, whatever that may be. So get really specific, keep it tight, keep it short. and do that maybe in August. Then September, you're kind of making your plans. Ideally, you already have an awesome relationship with your finance department, your CFO, whoever that is. You're in lockstep with them to understand the financials of the business. You're letting them know what the renewal rates are, what to look, what that's going to look like in projection. And I'm also just assuming a domestic employee base here as well. And then you're saying, okay, now how much wiggle room do I have in my budget? Am I going to add the additional pet insurance, for example? I always love to use pet insurance, 3 cats, but am I going to add the pet insurance? Am I going to add something else? Do I have to cut something? If I have to cut something, what are the comms on that going to look like? So you're really tight with your partnership, with your finance team. You get the budget all done. You get it approved. Maybe you need to get it blessed by your board, however it works. Boom, done. Then you start thinking about the actual mechanics of it. Also, if you can have somebody, I know this is a luxury, but if you have someone who's going to be on your team, doesn't even necessarily have to be on the people team, that can program manage this for you, that's a great partnership for you. This is a company-wide large program and you might need some help. So don't be shy in asking for a program manager. Then you're saying, I think there's a saying that says you have to tell people things 3 times before they actually hear you. So, hey, open enrollment's coming. Hey, open enrollment's here. Hey, open enrollment's almost done, right? So you making sure your comms go out, talk about the different comms later. Then you do the clean sweep. Now we're probably in October, end of October and November-ish timeline. Then you start the part that has always been the worst part for me, which is the nagging. You didn't do your open enrollment. Can you do your open enrollment, right? It's going to default to this thing. This is where I really want, where can you automate? Especially if your HR department's of 1. Obviously, I'm from Slack, so I have a bias, but use your Slack channels. If you don't know, there's a /remind command in Slack. You can set that to automate, right? You don't even have to remember to do anything. You can tell people hard deadline, and then the deadline comes, and then you're probably going to need a glass of wine because there's going to be somebody who didn't enroll, who needs to come talk to you, who has a sob story. You got to try to figure it out. But that's kind of my path in my calendar for open enrollment. What did I miss? What did I miss, Brandon?
So good. I think a couple of things, and maybe Erin, you can pull up the we've got a kind of a service calendar lead bind to, and folks can reach out to us. We'll share this after the session as well. I think one big thing that we have found, and you touched on it early, Dawn, which is getting very aggressive about getting the rates from your carriers, and especially once you've switched more kind of, if you're in large group, you're an experience rated. I think sort of maybe a little known secret, or something that I think traditional brokers spend less time on, is you can actually get early access to initial rates and trend and experience if you're really, really proactive about it. And the reason that's super important is to be able to do what you were talking about, which is let's go identify alternatives to, whether it's a medical insurance provider, dental insurance provider. It's super valuable for you to have a sense of what you're getting into in terms of renewal with your existing providers. So I try to throw that one out there. That's something that we really try to mechanize in the third quarter versus getting into September, where you still don't have visibility into what's going on. Dawn, I think a question I think about, Erin, you can take that screen up, is one thing that we're hearing a lot, and I think a lot of the folks who are tuning in are sort of like operating under this, we're getting leaner as opposed to we're getting more resources. And I was just on the phone with a client 2 days ago. They lost a member of their team, and now they're having to figure out, how do we dole out the work? How do we partition it? I'd love to get your thing. I mean, we've got a view on this too, but what tasks can and should these HR teams be offloading to their broker and really saying, no, you guys need to own this, and we're going to be your customer on that front when it comes to this sort of project management?
Yeah, we didn't pregame this, Brandon, so it's going to be interesting to see if we agree on this. Yeah. So the good thing about doing this work for 20 years is I've been through some downturns before. I've had lean teams, right? I've seen the other side of the coin.
Yeah.
And I think it is really about what resources and community do you have around you. And I think a great broker will help you in that period of time. So things that I would look to my broker to support me with, obviously all negotiation, I mean, that's just default, right? Comms planning, templates, PowerPoint presentations, education materials, anything like that, I would look for my broker to support and provide me. I might edit it to make it like, put it on my template, the company template, or give it the company vibe, but I would not start from a blank PowerPoint slide. My broker would be providing all of that. If I was going to do a benefits fair or virtual or in person, I would look for my broker to coordinate all of that for me. I'm looking for them also to bring me ideas and thoughts, and that, so I don't have to go to them and ask them to do something. I'm going to tell them, if you think about like a party plan, and they say like really fancy party planners have like mood boards and they tell their stories and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to bring my broker my mood board for open enrollment, and then they're going to come to me and tell me, okay, this is how it's going to be. And that's comms, that's events, that's education, that's data. So I can tell my story to sell the exec team and the CFO. That's going to be peer, and that's just not from the carrier and my usage rates, but that's peer data as well. Yeah, I think those are the things I'd be looking for.
Yeah, those are great. Yeah, I think I'd probably add to it. I think big plus one on, I am blown away by how many HR teams are sort of building their own open enrollment project plan and open enrollment materials. Like full stop, we believe that the modern broker partner should actually be owning all of that, including taking your brand and templates and supporting you on how do we get the information into that. That's a big one. I think the other one that really resonated, and you said it earlier, which is surveying your employees. That's a big deal. And I think your point about you better be doing that before middle of August if you're actually going to incorporate the results. That's a big one. That's a function that we sort of take on for our clients. We've got a survey template that folks can take as an open source project. But I think that's something that especially lean HR teams should be able to lean into their broker and say, hey, help me with best practices here, versus Googling around or, like kind of starting from scratch on that stuff. Those are big ones. And then I think another big one, especially in the sort of small and medium-sized employer side of things, is just managing the actual updating of the systems that you use to run open enrollment. So there's an infinite number of Ben admins out there. And so we essentially take an admin seat in that Ben admin from those folks that basically are responsible for making sure that the data around that gets uploaded. So those are some things that if you're not already putting those jobs on your broker's plate, you should do that now, or at least start to set those expectations. Yeah, I think those are really good. I love your point about tech solutions. I think Slack's an amazing one for repeating information. Any other things that you're seeing on the kind of the technology side of things around streamlining the renewal process that folks should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a big fan. I don't know if fan is the right word. I'm a curious experimenter of ChatGPT these days. And what I mean by that is it might destroy the world. We don't know yet. It could. The robots are coming for us all. But I also think it's here. And I think it's it's really important for HR professionals, people professionals, to be familiar with the technology and how to use it. And especially when your teams get leaner. So, what that could look like would be, I just helped someone the other day. They wanted, specifically, they were talking about rolling out a program. It doesn't matter, they're rolling out a program to employees, and they wanted like a template of, hey, has anyone rolled out this program to their employee base before? And I looked, because, I try to keep some stuff. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I was like, oh, I don't have it. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I could just toss this in ChatGPT. Tossed it in ChatGPT. I said, create a PowerPoint presentation, topic in the style of And 30 seconds later, is this slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, And I will tell you, it was kind of creepy, but also awesome, because I could have seen myself spending a week trying to put that together in the past. And again, not having to start from a blank piece of paper, blank screen, and be able to edit and add my own vibe and add in this thing or that thing, so much easier. So, I would say it's good for you to just know the latest technology. Get out there, open AI, it's free, just play around with it. Secondly, it'll save you, especially if your team has been asked to do more with less. Think about it as a member of your team.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's super interesting. I love that you had it generate a PowerPoint presentation for you from 0 to 1. Like, just even if it's not perfect, it's getting you maybe 50-60% of the way there.
Yep.
I love that. I think we talked a little bit about how do you address employee questions. We talked about open enrollment, but I think this is a big one that really we hear visceral stress from HR teams, especially when they're lean, which is the onslaught of employee questions that they're going to get around the renewal and open enrollment process. So I think the question is, maybe the prompt is, what's the most streamlined way to address those employee questions and concerns like during this renewal phase? Like, what are some hacks? How would you recommend that HR team of 1 or 2 to sort of like get prepped for that and do a good job?
So again, and I apologize for my bias, but the best I've ever seen was when we were at Slack and we had a channel that was just open enrollment 2023, for example, and people could go in and ask their questions. And the thing that was awesome about it was one, you could create your FAQ or you could pin it to the channel and then people could just reference it, right? The other thing is we set expectations that we check the channel twice a day, right? So it's not every time someone has a question, we're running there to answer it. It's twice a day, we're going to check it. But what happened in those lovely moments between the times that were like our scheduled checking times, where other employees were helping the employees, right? It was like, oh, I asked that question before, or here, I actually did the research and here it is. And so you're like basically helping the employee population get educated. They're teaching each other. It's not all going to you for your one team. And by the way, you can also just copy and paste the answers, for people, and they can search, right? If you want, like, search dental, there it goes, comes on up. So maybe not everybody's fortunate to have Slack or to have Teams or something like that. Doing an FAQ, I think, is just a really easy one, sending it to people, having open office hours where people can come and ask questions, and have your broker, by the way, have your broker do office hours. You don't even have to be there. Have your broker there, have them ask questions, let them do it. Sometimes your employees prefer it because they might be talking about a private health situation they don't want their employer to know about. And then finally, I would say, push people to the carriers. That is also an option, right? Everyone has a car. It's not always awesome to call an 800 number, but everyone has a card with an 800 number on the back. You can have them call too.
Those are great. I love the tactical Slack channel. That's kind of an aha moment for me too. The feedback loop that you get when employees answer other employees' questions and everyone gets the value of seeing that answer. I love it. Yeah, I think that maybe to plus one, you're sort of like your last point too. We believe that should be in the service plan of your broker. Like your broker should be owning office hours. They should be driving sort of a lot of that kind of question flow away from the HR team, especially when they're better at answering those questions. So that really resonates. I mean, we built a whole technology platform around member support, member experience, and whatnot. So I think I love that, and I think that the kind of going beyond like tactical too. How do you like office hours to you? Maybe just one quick double click, because a lot of people say, yeah, we should hold office hours. Like, what do you do when you hold them? Are you just like, you just open up time on the calendar and like the HR team's going to be available? Like, what's the sort of tactical approach there?
Yeah, so let's just do quickly too. So one would be like broker, right? So let's assume, I don't know if it'd be different for virtual versus in person, but let's just say Brandon's going to be in conference room B from 12 to 2. Sign up here if you want to talk about this, right? You can do that virtually, you can do it on a Zoom. That's one option. Yep. Another option can be to do it like right after a presentation. So if you're like, let's say you're changing medical carriers, then you're moving from Blue Cross to Cigna, for example, or something like that. right after that, where people are thinking about it and top of mind, and then tell them, maybe you schedule the presentation for 30 minutes longer, and then you have like some Q&A at the end, or time for people to resonate, so it's already on their calendar. I've done the standard tricks of like offering cookies and like, come get a toothbrush or whatever the case may be. I don't find that people really care that much about those things, although who turns down a good chocolate chip cookie? But it's really about like telling people when, telling people where, how they can access it, and who's going to be there. So I just say, have a space, reserve it, have people come.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe see what your demand is. Every company is different for demand. Don't book more. If people don't come, then you get to work and you have the gift of time. And
Yeah.
if people come, then you've been of service and of value.
Yeah, love that. Switching gears. So a question that we got was around ancillary benefits and thinking about kind of renewing ancillary benefits and usage rates. I think that's I think what we're seeing is a lot of pressure being applied to lots of different benefits that people bought during the pandemic time, and sort of this, whether you call it point solution fatigue or perks fatigue, and a new level of rigor on going like, do we need that? Should we be spending money on that? So when thinking about renewing ancillary, considering your mix, like maybe talk to the group about how you think about what sort of like good usage rates or engagement rates need to look like for you to sort of make the case to keep them versus, consider knocking them out of the benefits.
Yeah, I don't know what the standard is. Like if there is an industry standard. I remember when I started, people would say, "Oh, if your EAP is used at 3%, that's great usage." And I remember thinking 3%, that's not much at all. I like, 10% to me is kind of the floor. Now you want to look at the math of that, like what is the N behind it and all that kind of stuff. So it depends on the size of your company, and you want to, use common sense around it. But I would say 10% is kind of a good measure. If you're getting less than 10, it's probably, you should at least have the conversation of why you want to use it. Now, if it's something like, I don't know, maybe something that supports the LGBTQIA population or egg freezing, your ends might not be that high. And so the the utilization might be lower, but it might be really important to your employee brand, or it might be important to specifically, maybe your women's ERG asked for that benefit specifically. And so that might be some other reasons. But if it's less than 10, you should at least be looking at it and having the conversation is kind of what I would say.
I love that. I think to me, like the short answer is like, it's definitely nuanced. You have to think about it in terms of, kind of benefit by benefit. One just data point that I'll add, kind of the approach that we take is we go back to, we're really focused on holding the vendors accountable to the engagement rates or activation rates that they promise or that they describe as best practice, right? So Carrot Fertility or, Caregiver Services X, they'll have a point of view on like what good looks like there. And so that's a lot of times our starting point, where it's like, hey, how are we doing relative to what, our partner says is good? So that's another input, I think, into that calculus. And yeah, big +1 on kind of on what you said there. And I totally agree. I think we were having a recent conversation where a client of ours had recently put in a couple of benefits for very niche and very important to a very small component of their population. And the engagement conversation is totally different. We actually looked at, what's the engagement of that population? We had a rough order of magnitude of how many folks kind of fit in the bucket that need them. And it told a really good story. It's like people are actually getting value out of the benefit in that population. And that helped them reframe the conversation with in this case, their CFO, who's like, hey, what's the ROI or what's the business case for that benefit? I think maybe I want to transition to that, because I think another just like major stressor that I think we're seeing, we saw this in the questions too, which is that renewal presentation to the C-suite. And it's like the big moment. And it's even, I think what I'm observing is it's even more of a pressure cooker right now, just given the sort of macroeconomic financial pressures, a lot of these things that have kind of hit us over the last 12 months, depending on what industry you're in. So you've been doing this a long time. I'm sure you've done a lot of renewal presentations to the C-suite. Maybe just let's talk through Dawn's tips for absolutely sticking the landing on your, on your renewal presentation with C-suite. What are your thoughts?
I had a renewal once that came in at 32%. So that was a difficult
That's a tough
conversation.
one.
That's a tough
Wow.
one. Okay, so first thing is, I think the most important is this is not an us versus them conversation. This is we are in this together conversation. So one is, how can you start from a place of alignment, and not to sound like too coachy, but how do you take the issue or the challenge that might be between you two and put it out so you both can look at it together, and it becomes like this third party curiosity, right? And what I mean by that is, this sounds very esoteric, but what I mean by that is, oh, okay, so we have money constraints. What are we going to do? What does it look like? What can we look like? What can we look across the company to make this best for our employees? It's not necessarily what else do we have to cut from the HR budget to get this, right? Because it is for all. It is how we retain people. It's how people grow their families. It's how people are healthy enough to come to work. So it's not just an HR thing. So that would be number one, is how do you take the problem out between HR versus a finance and make it about the company? The second is always be building your relationship with the finance team. My joke with my finance friends used to be like, I have half the story, you have the story. Together we put it together and we have an actual full picture. They need you, we need us. Like, put it together, long-term relationship. The two of y'all should be like best buddies, like lockstep. And then the third thing I would say is data, right? Especially if you're talking to a finance person, they're going to want numbers, they're going to want, use that to inform. Don't just come in and say we have to do it, or look what the carriers gave us. And your broker will help you, I think, story build in my experience. But then story build, take your data and turn it into a compelling story. Pretend if you were going to give a TED talk in your CFO's office about the renewals, what would it look like? Right? And then tell the story of why it's important. And you need to know that story before you roll in. And I get it. It's hard, especially when you're a team of one or a team of fewer. You're being pulled in many directions. It can be frazzled. This is a time to set the tone, build the story. This is where you're going to sell for something that's going to pay for the rest of the year. If you do it right on the front end, it will save you a lot of pain throughout the rest of the year. And quite frankly, a lot of time sucky kind of stuff that you have to deal with.
I love those. Yeah, a couple of nuggets that I think are just so true. It's like, start the relationship building with your finance partner early, like now, like literally in the process of kind of bringing them along. Bring the data, and that applies in so many different ways, like employee surveys. Here's what the data is telling us there. Benchmarking. Here's what the data is telling us about the alternatives or peer set to business case for net new, benefit. Those really resonate. Maybe we can get concrete. You talked through like the 32% renewal, situation. But maybe walk through, how do you because I bet there are a lot of folks that are going to watch this that are literally staring down the barrel of a 20% renewal or 25% renewal. They truly will. What's your advice for sort of like managing that version of a conversation? Anything different that you should do?
Yeah. So I would say start where you can't. I know when I got my 32% renewal, I went and I got really scared and I got really nervous. So as much as you can, breathe out and breathe out into the fear, and then see where you can get yourself into a place of creativity. And what I mean by that is, again, not trying to get all woo-woo on you, but when you're scared, the neurocortex of your brain does not allow for creativity. So if you can just get past that, fear, anger, scared state, then creativity, all possibilities on the counter. And what I mean by that is, does the employer cover all the cost? Do you split that with the employee? How do you split that with the employee? Do singles, families, what does that look like? Is it percentages, different regions? What might that look like? Do you swap? It's not so different from a family budget. Do you swap one thing for another thing? Okay. And then what's the story you're going to tell to your employees? And I think that's the part. My experience with employees is they're usually reasonable. They're usually really thoughtful. If you can tell them why you're doing something, they might not like it, but they will understand it, and the trust between you and your employees will remain. Hey, we cut pet insurance because we didn't want to ask you to pay more for your medical and dental insurance. We hope one day we can bring that back, but right now we cannot.
Yeah.
Right? Or some version, or, we used to do 3 dental cleanings a year. Now we're only doing 2. You're still welcome to do 3, but the 3rd will be at your own cost. Right? So really talking through and looking at all the levers, all the creativity, because it's not just about money, it's about coverage, it's about the total package that you're giving your employees.
Yeah, that resonates. The why is so important. Maybe backing it up and we can transition into sort of managing cost. Rewind maybe 6 months or to right now, and they got that really high initial renewal back from their carrier, which I think a lot of folks are going to see that over the next 30 days. I think the big question is kind of now what? You're early on in that, in maybe the process. What's your sort of playbook there?
So let me understand the question. So you get the renewal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking about earlier. So we were just talking about how do you manage like the renewal strategy presentation in it, but now we're kind of early on in the process. So I think like let's call it right now, August, August, September. And we just got the initial renewal back from the carrier, like the first set of data back, whoever your insurance carriers came back and it's 18%, 25%, etc. And the question is sort of now what? Now what do I do?
Okay, so first thing I do, I scream into the void and say WTF, honestly, like holy cow. Second thing I say is, again, it depends on how you've been managing your usage and what your like how deep you're into it throughout the year. So maybe it's a total surprise, right? Maybe it's not a surprise. Maybe it's unhappy expected news. So I think that also kind of just depends. So one, I said this before, but one is just navigate through your own feelings and emotions quickly so you can get to the work. Second thing, call your broker. Like that, they are your best friend in this process, right? Now, they're probably the one that told you 25, 28%, whatever. Ask a lot of questions. Now what? What happened? When have you ever seen a renewal this high? What did you do? What did they do? What do you know? What's going to be really important for me to think about in the next 30, 60 days as I go to my C-suite, as I think about, making some trade-offs in some difficult economic conditions. Ask all those questions. Use your HR community and your peer group. Like I'm a firm believer that HR needs support from other HR people. I know Nava has a great community program where I see every single post that happens, all the advisors do. And sometimes I chime in if I have something to add, but this idea of HR people supporting each other, what are you doing in this environment? What does it look like? And then I think part of it can also be, it might be too late for this year, but are there educational opportunities for your employees going forward for next year to help bring down those costs so you can invest in more like preventative work and effort to try to keep the cost down overall.
Love that. Yeah. A couple other things that really resonate. I think this is from the broker perspective. This is when, and I'll put my CEO hat on first, actually. This is when, as a CEO or CFO, I want my team to have sort of exhausted all options. Like this is where I want to get options. And this is the moment where you, to your point, kind of extending, bring your broker in and go, we need to go and identify options here. So that even if we are going to go take the pain and there's a 25% renewal because that's the best, of the worst options, we know what the option set looks like. And that's going out to bid, that's looking at alternative funding arrangements, that's looking at creative, innovative plans though, that you might not choose, but you've at least exhausted that. So important, I think, especially when, kind of the finance leaders going like, WTF, like this is what's happening. I think the second half of that, which again is sort of part of the lean on your brokers, like very quickly gather benchmarking data. Because that is the second thing, which is, are we in this on our own? Or are we, are we part of a broader trend? That resonates a ton. Yeah, I know it is painful. I think one of the things that I find fascinating about this industry that is just very surprising to me is like, to me, getting leverage in a negotiation is about creating a competitive environment, like just having alternatives. That is like rule number one in terms of negotiating leverage. And I'm blown away at how often we see scenarios where you ask them the question, well, like, how many alternatives did you look at? And they're like, well, my broker didn't look at any, or we went back and forth with the one insurance carrier that we have, and they got us down from a 22 to a 17. And we're like, we're good. And it's just, you can do so much more than that, especially if you start early. So when you think about, I guess, maybe like, so flip side, just in terms of, as you're thinking about budget for your plan, right, and benefits, what do you see as like, I'm thinking about what are best practices for getting budget from finance and like getting that kind of partnership there. And maybe another frame could be just like an example of fighting for more budget and, in your career that you're like, this is how I did it. I think that's something that folks are really trying to figure out.
Well, I think the first thing I would say too is pick your battles, right? I mean, not everything, you don't need to go to war for every single thing, right? Find the things that are really important to you, to your company, to your employee population, that's going to have some sort of ROI. Don't go to war for everything. Number one, like your finance person is going to get they're just going to tune you out. And the other thing is you're going to exhaust yourself. So one is like, figure out what are you fighting for, and pick your time.
Yep.
Second thing is, to me, I mean, medical and dental are table stakes, right? So to me, you gotta kind of have that. I also probably put vision in there too, as someone who has needed eyeglasses for a very long time. So I put, I think those are kind of just table stakes. Then I would say, what is it that we want the employee experience to be? And really looking at it from that. And how do we continue to hold trust with our employee population? I think we've seen over the last couple of years, and especially in tech and a lot of layoffs that have happened, trust has eroded significantly. So where can we hold our employees' trust? And where I find that to be the case is like transparency and clarity of the why. So that going to your finance team and having that conversation, I think, is valuable. It's not just about the numbers. It's not, yes, we can find extra, $100,000 in the couch cushions, because they probably could, but it's what is this conversation that we're having and what are we trying to build together? I'll tell you a story about where I did fight. I fought for something that was really important to me, which was when Slack was acquired by Salesforce. Slack had the drug PrEP as just part of a standard pharmacy benefit. It wasn't a specialty drug. And so when we went into Salesforce, and it was on their specialty drug list. Yep. So what that meant was higher copays. It meant standing in different kinds of pharmacy lines. It meant a whole bunch of bureaucratic red tape. To me, that was a hill I was going to die on, because I feel like all employee populations should have equal access to care and safety for their health. And so if you're not familiar, PrEP is an LGBT, it's a gay men's HIV prevention drug, generally is how it's used. And so I fought and 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 I fought, and I had many conversations about it. I went to our, we called it our out ERG. I got information from them about what the experience was like. I connected them with the right people in Salesforce. I went and fought for the Salesforce thing. I talked to the finance people, all of those things for this one drug. And it was worth it to me. And to Salesforce's credit, it wasn't that they were fighting it. They just needed some more information and needed to be maybe more educated on what the experience was like from the employee's perspective. And then they added it, and it was great. And so something from Slack was actually able to benefit all of the Salesforce employees, which was awesome. And I was super proud of that. But that was something that was a hill I wanted to die on. There were other things that Slack's benefits had. For example, this is very, very nice. I think it came from having a Canadian CEO, but 100% of our healthcare was paid for by the employer. Salesforce doesn't do that. They split the cost with their employee, like majority of employers do. And so that was not something that the cost was too much, and it was different, and they weren't going to do something for one acquisition that they weren't going to do for the rest of the companies. And so that was something that we weren't able to move the needle on, and our employees we had to explain it to them and work through. So financially, it didn't make sense for everybody to cover the cost of all the insurance going forward. Does that make sense? Is that kind of what you're looking for? Yeah.
I love it. No, I think that Yeah, I like focus on the battles that you really, really want to fight. I think also just like start with the why, and like that was such a great frame. It's like start with the outcome, like here's what we're trying to solve for, and therefore this is what I'm recommending or advocating for. Maybe we can keep
Can I just say one
Yeah.
thing? Okay, you said that and it sparked a thing. This is also a time where you can use data in terms of go to your recruiting or your TA teams. Like, what are you hearing from candidates in terms of your employment packages? And then your exit interview data. If you're, I always ask a question about benefits when people are leaving, because I just want to know if there's one, is there sexy new benefits out there that I'm not knowing about, or what are my peer companies that are taking talent from my company offering? So use that in your data, because I think that's a real ROI conversation.
Totally. It directly connects benefits to the thing that is so directly impactful to the organization too, which is just keeping our folks. Are they leaving us? Yeah, maybe on the kind of on that thread, actually, it's just like trends in benefits, anything that, as we're going into this renewal in a very different environment than, maybe this time last year, any things that you're seeing that are sort of like big shifts in the benefits landscape for, HR folks, either things that are getting sort of contracted out in this new world that we're entering, or focus areas for HR leaders when it comes to benefits?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still early enough in the year that the majority of my community is not yet like it's just starting to percolate a little bit. So if you're having the conversation now, pat yourself on the back because you're on the early side, and I think you'll be to your advantage. But I think the number one trend that's different from last year, unfortunately, is just do more with less. And so I think that's less budget. I think that's less headcount. I think that's less time. And so I think, unfortunately, that's probably the number one thing that I'm hearing that is a universal consistency.
Yeah, totally. We are the same, seeing that as well. Any on that, I think you shared like a really good story from the trenches, with that fighting for that drug. Any kind of sort of like renewal mishaps or things that just didn't go as planned for you during renewals that are worth sharing to this group? And
yeah, I think the reason I was able to have a career for 20 years is I quickly forget most things, but I do remember. So this was back in the day, and we were kind of advertising the open enrollment was coming, and so I had someone from my team order just like a tchotchke. It was a hot cold pad, like you could put it in the microwave, it would help or freeze it, whatever, and put the logo on it and put it on everybody's desk with a little card that said like open enrollment is coming, right? Like that was what I did. And it's like, okay, that's, and I think I had been with the company for 2 months, 3 months at this time, right? It was my first open enrollment, like my time to shine. I'm so proud. And I was sitting at my desk, and the CEO comes by with another person, and they say, "Hey, let's ask Dawn, she'll know." And I said, "Oh, great. What will I know?" And they say, "Who authorized this ugly pad of weird balls with our logo on it? It looked like somebody came and took a poop in the river and then put our logo on it."
Oh, wow.
And I was like, well, that was me. I chose that was me. And the CEO laughed and said, "Okay, well, let's maybe not put our logo on everything." And I said, "Okay, fair enough. Good to know." But there's nothing like a CEO coming and telling you your open enrollment swag looks like someone took a poop in the river.
That's a good one, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
One last thing on the sort of work. So you talk about the HR, like lean on your community, and it's something that we believe really deeply into, is that one of the best ways for HR folks to get support is through their peer groups who are dealing with all this stuff and nuance. What would be your advice for these folks in terms of just like where to go find that community, who they can lean on for support? Like, what are your pro tips?
I mean, it depends on where you want to build your community. I mean, shameless plug, Nava community Slack team, I think is a great place to be. I'm in there, so come on, shout out, say hey. The other places, I mean, if you're female, I think the chief community, the female chief community is a great networking community. I think that there are different Google groups. I'm a member of 3 of them, of different HR people. It can be growth companies. It can be part of education, it can be part of, healthcare, whatever it might be. So find your Google group. You can, literally search on the internet and see if something comes up, but who are the people you go to and talk to and say, where are you going? And if there's no place, then make your own community, right? Make an agreement that you're gonna have a Slack team, or you're gonna have a Google group, or you're gonna have a call once a week, a month, whatever, to just check in on different things. But if you can't find your community, build your community. But who are the people you respect, you want to learn from, and that are maybe in peer industry or peer companies?
Love that. I was talking to someone who, she was like, I've got a text thread with 13 other HR leaders, and that is my most trusted sort of insider community. I just loved how sort of grassroots it was. But to kind of further that plug, if you want to join the Nava HR community, we've got something like 220 HR leaders from around the country asking lots of good questions, giving each other support. I think it's just so important. I think we're at time. So Dawn, thank you so much. This has just been fun to unpack so many different questions that have actually come in directly from HR folks. Two things, a couple of just things for the folks in the audience. If you've got a question that didn't get answered today, or that it was spurred, you can shoot me an email at brandon@navabenefits.com, and I will get you an answer from our team or our advisors. We love that. We typically get dozens of questions afterwards, and then we get to sort of tackle them together. Also, just, as we're all going into the beginning of this renewal season, if you need a second set of eyes on your benefits, on your thought, your kind of strategy, where you're going, we do what we call benefits audits, which is basically just the top to bottom audit of your benefits against benchmark data, to point out areas that we, see as being opportunities or threats. We're happy to do that for free. You can send me an email, and we'll get you set up one-on-one with someone on there. And then I think there's a couple of deliverables or templates that we talked about. So we've got the employee survey template, which is free and online. We've got the RFP template, and we've got the service plan. So basically the renewal kind of timeline template. You can download those for free as well. So very pumped to have this conversation with you, Dawn. And thanks for just leaning in and riffing with me on this. I think it'll be super helpful.
My pleasure. Good luck to everyone during open enrollment season. It is, it might be your Super Bowl. Go strong. Go strong.
Let's go win. Okay. Have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.